Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How to Wrangle Data for Machine Learning on AWS. My name is Pratap Ramamurthy. I'm a Partner Solutions Architect for Amazon Web Services, and I will be your host and moderator for today's presentation. When you join today's webinar, you selected to join by either a phone call or your computer audio. If for any reason you would like to change your audio selection, you can do so by accessing your audio pane in the control panel. From this control panel, you will also have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions panel. We will collect the questions and address as many as we can during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Also, at the end of today's event is a brief survey. Please stay connected until the end of this broadcast and submit your feedback as your opinions count. Lastly, the PowerPoint presentation will be available through SlideShare along with the recording of the webinar on YouTube. This will be sent by an email 2 to 3 days after the conclusion of the event. So keep an eye out for the follow-up email sent to the address that you provided. All right. Again, welcome to today's webinar, How to Wrangle Data for Machine Learning on AWS. My name is Pratap, and I'm a Partner Solutions Architect for Amazon Web Services. I will be your host and moderator for today's webinar. In addition to learning about AWS, we will also hear from David McNamara, a Customer Success Manager from Trifecta, and Harrison Lynch, Senior Director of Product Development at Consensus Corporation. In this webinar, you will learn how it's easy to get started with machine learning solutions for data wrangling on the cloud on AWS. Why automating your data wrangling tasks can lead to greater data accuracy and more meaningful insights, and it's a continuous process from making it manual to automation, and also how you can reduce your data prep time by 60% or more with self-service data wrangling tools built on AWS. You can also reduce your, you'll also learn how Consensus Corporation is using Trifecta on AWS to detect fraud. All right. Also, and remember, please post your questions in the chat box throughout this presentation, as we will review the questions at the end of today's event. Let's begin. Machine learning on AWS. All right. Amazon has a really long heritage of using machine learning internally. We probably heard of how we had personalized recommendations in our retail website, Amazon.com, and also we use machine learning for automating fulfillment and warehouses. We use drones. You probably heard about that. And the latest one is probably Amazon Go, which provides a completely new experience for retail customers who can just walk in and out of a store without using a checkout. But the most popular is probably the Amazon Echo device, which has been sold millions of devices around the world, and the Amazon Alexa, that is the voice behind the device itself, just powered by AI and machine learning. Our mission is to put machine learning in the hands of every developer and data scientist, right? And why is the case? Why do we think this is important? We think it's important because we're seeing a strong adoption for machine learning, and it's a $46 billion market by the year 2020. And there is also adoption across the board. In this graph, I'm not sure if you can see it, this font is a little small, but there is adoption across the board, across industries. The dark green dots are higher adoption versus lighter green means lower adoption. But the high-tech industry is always a little more invested in this, but there's general overall adoption across the board, and the number of startups are from 3,000 plus today, from up to just 100 in the year 2011. All right, So Amazon, let's talk about Amazon machine learning stack on AWS. So the way I look at this is I see three tiers here, right? The bottom tier of services is called frameworks and infrastructure, and then we have a middle tier, platform and application. I would like to go from the bottom up, right? The bottom is what we have is you have hardware, GPUs, CPUs, Lambda functions, and so on. We also provide you with a deep learning army that comes pre-packaged, installed with the popular frameworks like TensorFlow, Apache MXNet, and so on. Right. On top of this is what you have platform services. Platforms provide you with a way to easily create your own machine learning models, train your models, and so on. We have quite a few of them, each serving a different purpose. The newest one is Amazon SageMaker, which was announced and released in reInvent last year, which is a platform to help you build your deep learning models. Along with the other platforms, including DeepLens, which is a development learning tool, and the Amazon Machine Learning service itself, which is an easy-to-use click-through platform, and so on. On top of this is what we have is called application services, or these are services which have machine learning models already built in, and the customers consume them using REST APIs. And we have quite a few of them now, and they can be bucketed into three buckets: vision services, speech services, and language services. We can go. It would take hours for me to explain all these services, but they are really easy to use. You go into the console, you can start using them and start testing them in just a few minutes. But the latest one, I want to talk about one specific service that was launched recently, that is Amazon Recognition Video. This is analytics or machine learning on video, and what it does is you provide videos. It would be able to provide you these 6 features, that is object and activity detection, person tracking, can track people in a video even if the person goes in and out or behind objects, facial recognition, real-time streaming, content moderation to see if it's safe for work or not, also celebrity recognition. One example here is, let's take an example of this video of a party, and Amazon Recognition Video would do something like this. It would detect objects like balloon, gift. Also, it would do activity detection, right? It sees that, hey, somebody's opening a present, so that is one of the activities that it has detected. Take a look at Amazon Recognition Video if you're interested. All right. Who is using these services? Customers. We have thousands of customers who run machine learning workloads on AWS today as we speak. And I want to talk a little bit about Amazon Machine Learning Competency Program. This is a program for partners who have established credibility and who have established expertise in a specific area. We have 17 different competency programs, and the Amazon Machine Learning Competency Program was launched at reInvent 2017. And we're proud to say that Trifecta is one of our launch partners for this program. And with that, I would like to hand over the slide to David McNamara from Trifecta. David?
Thanks, Pratap, and hello, everyone. My name is David McNamara. I'm a Customer Success Manager here at Trifecta. Really excited to be presenting alongside AWS and Harrison from Consensus. Okay. At Trifecta, we believe that our ability to solve big problems in business and society depends on seeing patterns in the data that we collect. But data comes in all shapes and sizes, and too often the messy process of pulling it together gets in the way of any progress. At Trifecta, we empower change makers to work with diverse and fragmented data as it's being cleaned and refined so that they can ask more interesting questions and create a better future. Did I just skip this slide? I did that. So Trifecta is recognized among industry analysts as the #1 data preparation solution. We have users across 10,000 plus companies, 85 plus strategic and SI partnerships, including Amazon Web Services, And we are the enterprise standard data wrangling tool at over 100 customers. So why is data wrangling important? There's a joke from the Kaggle founder and CEO, Anthony Goldblum, that says that 80% of data science is cleaning the data and 20% is complaining about cleaning the data. Insights garnered from data can only be as good as the data that feeds the models. If you're feeding the models bad data, you will get bad insights that can cause more harm than good. This is what makes data wrangling such a key component to machine learning and data modeling. So what does Trifecta do? Trifecta's interface provides robust data profiling features, allowing the user to assess the value distributions or categorical distributions, check for missing and mismatched values, and discover exactly what is in their data. Then, the user can move on to restructuring their data sets to a standardized format before moving on to cleaning up anomalies and standardizing columns. Next, Trifecta allows the user to blend their data through joins and unions from disparate sources to create a master output of their data. And once the first iteration of wrangling is complete, the user can validate that the output is as desired before publishing back to S3 for use in downstream analytics tools, data models, and simulations depending on the customer's need. A typical ML or AI workflow might look like this. You have data from disparate sources, whether it's Hadoop, cloud applications, relational databases, or flat files on your computer, and you need to prepare this data in order to train your models. Once you have properly validated your wrangled data, you move to operationalizing your data pipeline and monitoring the data models. Trifecta cuts the preparation burden significantly with its intuitive interface, machine learning guided transformations, and real-time step-by-step look at your data, which you will see in our demo, which I will show you in just a moment. Okay, so we should be in Trifecta's interface now. In this demo, we're going to take a look at retail transaction data for cell phone purchases and clean and combine this data with customer-related details. We will create conditional binary columns using the data to create a retail risk score for customers. This data is being prepared to feed machine learning algorithms, and it's worth noting that this data is not at all representative of consensus data. Okay, so I'm going to start by jumping into this transaction file. Both of our files that are presented here are coming from S3. We also support a multitude of different platforms like on-premise, cloud platforms, application data, and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this recipe. And this will bring us into Trifecta's transformation grid. Now, we're presented here with our data in a familiar grid-like interface. In addition to that, Trifecta is presenting us with some information on each of our columns. So you can see we have value distributions in each of the columns' histograms. We have data quality bars that measure the validity of the data within each of the columns. And this is based on the data type for each column that Trifecta has inferred. Everything that you see in Trifecta's interface can be interacted with. So what stands out immediately is this subscription start column appears to have some mismatched values in it. I can select those mismatched values and take a look at what those values might correspond to. We can see here that some of the date formats may be different from the primary format in this column. Now, if I go into the column details, I can take a closer look at the data within this column. You can see again here that our mismatched values are being identified. We have some additional distributions here, like weekday and month, specific to the date data type. And if I go into the patterns view, you can see that Trifecta has identified various patterns within this column. Now, it looks like both of these two pattern formats are being identified as mismatched. So what I can do is I can select the top value here, and Trifecta's machine learning is going to generate a list of suggestions on how I might want to proceed. So I can see that Trifecta has suggested I can either filter down my data to only keep values that match this particular pattern, or I have this suggestion to convert these 3 patterns to a standardized pattern format that we have down here. Now, if I select this suggestion and go back to the grid, you'll also see that I'm getting real-time feedback and a preview of what this column will look like should I choose to apply this suggestion to my data. This appears to achieve what I want to achieve, so I'm going to go ahead and add this step to my recipe. Now, I have some features in both my transactions file and my customers file that I want to compare to identify any potential red flags that might indicate fraud. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to join my 2 data sets together. I'll go ahead and select join, choose the data set that I want to join with. Trifecta is going to give me a preview just so I can validate that this is the correct data set that I would like to join with. And then I'll go on to selecting my join keys. Now, again, Trifecta will try to infer the best columns to join on. If it inferred incorrectly, I can always go in here, manually change the columns I want to join on, choose from a list of other suggested column keys, and so on. But these are the columns I want to join on, so I will select those, add in all of the columns that I want in my output. I have a duplicate here, so I'm just going to go ahead and gray that out so that it won't be in my output. And one more thing I want to do is I might want to add a prefix to all of the columns from my customers file. Once this is done, I'm just going to select an inner join from this case, but we do have the ability to do various outer joins as well. So I'll go ahead and add this to my recipe. Okay, so the 2 features that I want to compare are, the first, I want to look at the subscription start date, and I also have a subscription end date coming in from my customers file. Now you can see most of the values within this customer end date are missing, so I might just enter an arbitrary value here for an end date in the future. I'll select the suggestion again. This time I'm going to modify it. And I'm going to change this to, let's just say the 31st of December, 2025 should be a safe bet. So I'll go ahead and add that to my recipe. And now I'm going to do that comparison that I alluded to. So I'm going to go ahead and choose through my functions. I'll select date and times, and I'm going to calculate the date difference between the subscription start and the subscription end. So Trifecta will guide me along this function. I'm going to select my end date here, which is the subscription end, and I'm going to calculate this in days. Lastly, I'll go ahead and call this subscription length. I'll go ahead and add that to my recipe. And using this subscription length column, I want to identify subscriptions that were shorter than 5 days. That might be a red flag that we want to look at for someone who cancels their subscription immediately after buying a phone. Could be indicative of fraud. So I want to identify those values. I'll choose an if then else condition, and I'm just going to specify subscription length less than 5. And if it's less than 5, I want to give it a value of 1. If it's greater than 5, then I don't really care about those values. I'll give it a value of 0. And I'm going to call this column fraud check 1. Now, one more measure that we want to look at is whether or not the customer changed their payment type from their customer information to their transaction. This is another red flag that we might want to identify. So again, we're going to do a condition here. We'll do if then else again. And this time we're going to say if the payment key is equal to our current payment key, then that's not a red flag. I'll give it a 0. But if they are different, that could be a red flag. So I'll give that a 1. And I'm going to call this fraud check 2. So now that I have these 2 binary columns that I've created, I want to add these 2 columns together to get a total fraud score that we'll use to filter down our data. So we're going to go ahead and add the fraud check 1 to fraud check 2. We'll call this new column fraud score. And this should give us some values that we can take a closer look at. And so for the final thing that I want to do in this data set is just filter out any of the fraud scores of 0, because those rows don't indicate any potential fraudulent activity. So I'll go ahead and add that to my recipe. So what we've just done here is we've created a recipe that we can reuse and automate in the future as new data comes in. We can put this on a schedule so that our output is constantly being updated with the most up-to-date information. And so we've really taken a lot of time out of the data preparation component of our workflow, and we can really focus more on the analysis and data modeling. So with that, I will go ahead and hand this back to Harrison.
David, I have a quick question from the audience that I want to, I think is very relevant. Once you build these features, can you persist in a database? Is it persisted? Where is it persisted?
So the file, we can connect to a database and write back to an output. That output can then be continuously updated through a schedule. What that schedule will do is trigger a job to be executed every time the schedule is triggered, and that will update the output with all of the new data that has come into the database.
Oh, okay. I have one more very interesting question. I think if you can go back to the dates and how you showed it. So the question is, when you have 3/4/2018, how do you know if it's March 4th or April 3rd? How does it know this?
That is a great question. In all likelihood, because the second value here, which clearly indicates a date because a lot of these values are going above 12, which wouldn't happen with months. So Trifecta is able to identify this first set of digits as the month and the second set of digits as the day. And then, of course, since we have a 2-digit year here, this is staying pretty much constant throughout the entire set of rows. So that's pretty clearly a year.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it sees the previous values or other values and compares it and sees what's the trend. Okay, cool.
Yep, we have a set of different date formats that we accept, and so Trifecta will look through those date formats and identify the match.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you.
Cool. Yep. Yeah, so now I guess we can pass off to Harrison, and he's going to walk through consensus use case.
Thanks, David, and thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate your time. So I'm Harrison Lynch, Senior Director of Product here at Consensus, and we take a few minutes to explain to you what Consensus is. One moment. There we go, that's me. Next slide, please. Okay, so Consensus began life as letstalk.com. We were an online retailer of wireless phones, launched in 1999, the original .com boom. Things went pretty well. We wrote a Series A. iPhone came out. That pretty much was the beginning of the end for that piece of the business. And it probably exposed a fundamentally flawed business model we had. So in 2012, we were acquired by Brightstar, who's a global distributor of mobile phones, and they rebranded us as Consensus. We took that e-commerce platform we had built with XML integrations into the wireless carriers and turned it into an in-store platform for selling mobile phones and launched it into Target. And then shortly thereafter, due to a few different things, Target acquired us from Brightstar, and we are now a Target company. So what's Consensus's value proposition? We take a myriad of API endpoints you would need to integrate if you were selling wireless phones, probably across 3 carriers or 140 endpoints, and we condense those and aggregate them into a set of about a dozen or so canonical APIs. So normalized request responses, and we take all the error codes and make sense out of them for you. In addition to that, we can add other services into that same set of APIs and extend those as far as you want. So we add in warranty, we can add in music streaming, we can add in subscription video, anything that requires creating an account in an end system and activating that account. So what that provides you as a retailer is a few things. One, easy maintenance. We take a lot of the headaches away. Second one is that we can allow you to add incremental services on and on and on. And the third one is that we have a unified UI that makes training very, very easy, and it's the same experience really almost no matter what you're selling. So we call that multiplex, and what that does for the retailer additionally is adds two major things. One is that we assist with the sale much more during that, both from the UI perspective as well as enhancing your cart and your margin. The second one is that enables you to offer products in store through the subscription type selling experience, so we can finance or we can add third-party financing for through other entities. So that's what Consensus brings to the table. The main piece of the business, of course, is selling mobile phones. Next slide. All right, and in wireless retailing, it's a very tricky economics here. So the phones you're buying cost anywhere about $850 as a midpoint. Generally, when somebody is coming in and buying them, they're financing them these days. The best customers finance 100% of them or close to that. So what it means is you're handing over the counter a product worth several $100s for which you're receiving $0 back, and you're expecting a receivable to be paid by a third party, usually a carrier. The carrier will cover the cost of that product because they're the ones taking the paper to finance it. They also pay a commission for creating the sale for them. But as a retailer, most of your profit is made on selling warranty and accessories. So it's a little bit like a gas station model. That said, if that sale turns out to be fraudulent, the carrier is going to take back that commission and the device subsidy. So one bad sale can wipe out the profit of up to 10 good sales, and that number can move around depending on what type of sale it is, the carrier, et cetera, et cetera. But this is kind of a general guideline here. So it can be quite risky. It's also extremely attractive to fraudsters. And trying to go to the next slide. Okay. So when someone comes in to buy a mobile phone financed, a credit score is created and run. That said, credit scoring really doesn't do you a lot of good to stop fraud, because if you're going to steal an identity, you're going to steal people with good credit. So credit scoring, like I said, on the left-hand side is just trying to figure out if this person is going to pay on time. That said, what we're looking for is more of a question of will they ever pay, and really, are they who they say they are? Identity theft is a big problem, as well as credit muling is a secondary one. So we analyze all kinds of different data points about the order. Things, for example, how far do you live from the store? What sorts of things are you buying? We look at things like how long has that rep been working there? Time of day, if you're porting in a number, from what type of carrier you're porting it in, so on and so forth. So in order to do that, you need to crunch a lot of data and create a nice standardized data set that you can now create models out of.
Harrison, this is Pratap. May I interrupt you for a second?
Sure. Yeah.
I have a quick question. Like when I first heard about Consensus, I've never heard of Consensus before this. I was understanding this use case. But I hear that you're working with several large vendors. So tell me this, like when I go to a vendor and I'm trying to purchase a cell phone with a service, like between I'm the customer and the vendor is there, where does Consensus come in?
So we're completely in the background. You have no idea who we are. We're powering the software that you're seeing a rep interact with. And specifically, this fraud piece here is running deeply behind the scenes. Once the order information is collected, we analyze it and return a response in about 500 milliseconds.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yep. So all you know from the experience of the guest in store is that you're informed by the rep whether they can proceed with the sale or they need you to call an escalation line to discuss your order with what we call an order verification rep, and they can de-escalate that that conversation and then can talk to you about other options for verifying your identity. So part of that also is our mission there is for safety of the sales rep and to remove that piece of the transaction from being on their head. So as I was saying, to build a model, you follow sort of a standard process. I have a quick outline here. You have to take your data, you analyze it, you identify what's interesting to you, augment it with some other data, and you transform it. After that, you then follow the process for evaluating your model. So what Trifecta helps me with is this left-hand side of it, 1 through 5. And then you pump that model into a system that you've built to score the order. And so this is a little picture we made of ours. Basically, you inject your orders. As that data comes in, it gets exploded into the format you need it to be analyzed. We apply it on different models we have running. We use Apache Storm. We carve out a small percentage of the orders for a control group, which means no matter what the score is or no matter what we think of it, we let those through. That's how you keep your model honest. We also have a rules engine, which allows us to divert orders based on things that you haven't been able to prove yet mathematically or for other reasons. We can also at that point call a third-party service to render their own point of view on that order. Or we can have random manual reviews, and then yes, we return back to the system via our REST API response and approve decline. And like I said, it's sub 500 milliseconds is our product standard. We're actually well below that. And so when we were going down this road and figuring out what we needed to do to combat this type of fraud, we found at the time that most of the products out there were pretty limited and could only offer logistic regression models, and they were sophisticated but a little primitive for all the different ways we wanted to explore. So we built our own system, and that allowed us to explore basically every model that we can find in various libraries, and then you can just determine which one works best for you for reasons both for performance, for accuracy, for profitability. And again, having the ability to rapidly clean your data, standardize it, and then run it through these different models is key. So that said, we had to look around for a data wrangling solution. Prior to me using Trifecta, a lot of it was done with things like either using various SQL commands, Excel, which as anybody who's tried that will attest to, can be terrible for doing things like this. So what I need to do is join all these disparate data sources together. Probably there's about 8 to 10 sources we can use at any one time. Some come from the carrier data, some are internal order data. We also use external data, things like geo data about what's the census tract that is included for from where that customer is coming, what's some various data about that census. We analyze all these different points. And as anyone who's done this will attest to, the data is often messy across different carriers. These are all completely different companies. Their data is not standardized to each other. Their reporting within each other might also be inconsistent. Sometimes they shift their logic midstream on how they do things because they make different business decisions. Additionally, anybody who's worked in a development organization will tell you that the more you have to rely on developers or data analysts, the more questions get raised about the productivity of that expense. So me being a product guy and coming from a product point of view, I like to prototype and experiment a lot and figure out what we want to do and then bring it into a little more well thought out to developers to do. And so what that means is I like to be able to work solo when I can, but I have a limit to how many things I can learn. And it turned out I'm kind of lousy at SQL. So I needed a way to scale the discovery, and I need to be able to act on hunches. And and part of the whole deal with any of this kind of activity is you have to explore the ground truth and understand the data fundamentally and how that interacts with the business and vice versa. Again, needed a tool that helps me do this. And so Trifecta really, as I started using it, became that tool and really accelerated our ability to try new things and explore different avenues without it turning into 5-6 people on a Scrum team trying to take different shots in the dark. Additionally, some of the challenges I run into is not only is the data in the different places, it's sometimes pretty toxic, as I would call it. So we deal with a lot of what we call PII data, personally identifiable information, being owned by Target. Target is incredibly protective of what they call guest data. They really like it to be touched and observed and used as little as possible. They feel like they are caretakers of someone else's information. So in many cases, I've got to work with black box data, or I need to get those values hashed before they can be handed to me or to somebody else. So classically, that would mean having a developer write a script, hand it off to our SRE team. The SRE team then creates an output and hands it back to me, and I've kind of got to trust that it all works. So again, Trifecta helps instead stitch that together in a repeatable process that we can hand off and understand what was happening. In addition, if your data has gaps or you need to reformat things, when you repair that data or alter it, you want to be able to make that repeatable. Again, if you're at all like me, you forget to write things down sometimes. And despite all the best Jupyter Notebook best practices, if you're not writing that stuff down, you're skipping steps. And so within Trifecta, it inherently records what you're doing and lets you run back and audit. Hey, that's the transformation I did there, and so this is left with maybe why did I do that? So this allowed us to do a lot of work on exploring how census data may or may not be indicative of fraud or risk. It actually turned out to be not useful, which was to me was still a great outcome because it put that argument to rest. So as I said, and then tracking your changes, and what term that gets thrown around a bit, data provenance, is a important factor that Trifecta brings to the table, because inevitably when you come across some of these conclusions, you need to be able to show your work. And as you ripple that out through an organization, people they want credibility beyond just trusting you yourself. So your ability to show, we started the data from here in its pristine state, and here's how it comes out, and you can follow it all the way through, is really important to maintaining and building credibility. So as a result of bringing Trifecta in, I've been able to take my data discovery down to things that used to take me several days, 2-3 days, maybe more. I can kind of do this stuff in a day or less, and I can do this thing without requiring my entire attention to do nothing else. In addition, the data prep is down to about an hour now. Again, where I used to have to try to rerun all these commands through SQL and running different scripts and hoping things worked. Going back to recheck it, now it's pretty much I drop the data sets in, click a button, go to lunch, come back, it's done. And that's in a worst case scenario. In many cases, it's done in a matter of minutes. So that's our story. That's how I use Trifecta and how it really helps with this combating fraud. And happy to take any questions.
All right, thanks, Harrison. We have quite a few questions that the participants have asked us. Let me try to divvy this up. All right, question for Trifecta, David. So just to clarify, many people have asked like whether what you saw was real data. That was not real data. That was fake data, just for the purposes of demoing.
Yes.
The second is right. Yeah, there was not real email addresses. Okay, quick question for Trifecta. Does the tool help to impute data?
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Are we talking about data interpolation or?
I don't have more specifics from this participant, but we can switch to a different question while this person
Sure,
is asking.
yeah.
Okay, is a Trifecta? Well, okay, another question. The demo that you showed, is that Trifecta running from the AWS Army?
Yeah, so this was our Pro edition, which is installed on top of an Amazon EC2 cluster. So what you were seeing was our Amazon-based product. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. What formats do you support? PDF, text, etc.?
As input, we accept JSON, CSV, TSV, gzip, Hive. We do not accept PDF as far as I'm aware, but XML, and I might be missing some, but that's off the top of my head, at least.
Okay, one more question on data. Can Trifecta validate street numbers, cities, postal code, and country codes using standard databases or APIs like USPS database?
To a certain extent, yes. We do have pattern identification for street numbers, cities, and states, zip codes. Trifecta will be able to identify if a zip code is not valid. We also have user-defined functions that you can call into external APIs to get validation from external sources as well. So there's sort of a lot of flexibility there in how you want to validate various column types.
Okay.
And I can say that that's a piece that we've implemented as well. So when with our data sets, we run our addresses through an address validation system, and then also validating the geocoding and getting that data back. So it's quite nifty.
Cool. Thanks, Harrison. Okay, back to Trifecta. We have lots of questions for Trifecta today. All right, can Trifecta calculate correlations between specific columns or a group of columns against a target?
So there's an important distinction to make between ourselves and other analytics tools. We're primarily a data preparation tool. So we're not built to have really complex analytics capabilities. With that said, you can calculate simple correlation coefficients, and so on, using various different sets of equations that you can build inside of Trifecta. But the primary focus is to prepare the data that you can then use in downstream tools where you will do some of your more advanced analytics or data modeling or what have you.
Okay, cool. All right. One more question. Can the same recipe be used for data sets that change? For example, client one sends date format, date, month, year. Client two sends date format, month, date, year. We always want year, month, date. Would this require two different recipes?
It wouldn't require two different recipes, but it might require two different steps depending on the complexity of the different date formats that you have in your data set. So for instance, if you had two rows, one was 3/4/2018 and the other was 4/3/2018, there's not a lot to go off of between those two values to identify if one is date, month, year, and the other is month, date, year. But you can use other features in your data set to calculate that. So for instance, if you have a column that specifies the region that the data is coming from, or that data point is coming from, then you can do a condition that basically says, if region is Europe, then you're going to interpret that date as probably day, month, year, rather than month, day, year. And so you can put steps in your recipe to reformat the date based off of other columns that give you more information. Does that make sense?
It made sense for me. Okay, next question. One more about the data. Sorry, go ahead. All right. One more question about the data wrangling. How do we handle null values in data in Trifecta? Does it help to fill in mean or NA for those columns?
Yep. Yeah. So as I showed in the demo, we just simply filled in those missing values for the end date with an arbitrary date off in the future. You can fill in with the last available value. You can fill in with the average of that column. There's sort of a variety of ways that you can fill in null values, and you can create custom calculations to fill in those null values as well.
Okay. All right. I noticed David writing formulas in some language. Is that a proprietary Trifecta language?
Yeah, we call that Wrangle. So it is a language that's been developed in-house.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now switching gears a little bit. Is Trifecta HIPAA compliant?
What?
This is for David.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, yes. I'm not on the product team, so I'd have to do some further validation there. But as far as I'm aware.
Okay. All right. Question for consensus. What is your end-to-end data model? Is Trifecta used? Is that after parsing?
I'm trying to think how to answer that. Well, I'm trying to understand the question. So end-to-end data model.
I think the question the participant is trying to ask from the raw data to having your insights or your fraud detection. Where does Trifecta fit there?
Right. So Trifecta is basically, it's the data prep step to create a data set that then what we do is we take that set and then run it through different modeling systems or algorithms. So we use a combination of scikit-learn. We also use a product called Data Robot, where you can take a data set and then it runs it through a whole spectrum of algorithms and tries various combinations to tell you which set might be the best route to take. So that's where it fits into that pipeline. It's not part of a runtime system.
Okay, cool. Okay, question back to more questions for Trifecta. Is there a way to incorporate Trifecta into a larger batched or programmatic process? Also, this is related to one more question about if I want to run a large amount of data, like a petabyte of data, how is it done? I think we did not talk about that.
Yeah, so I saw this might answer two questions. I saw there was a question in there as well that asked if all of the data in the grid was loaded in memory. So what Trifecta does is it takes a sample of your data set that is presented in the grid. This is a 10 megabyte sample. We have a ton of different sampling methods that you can choose from to make sure that the sample you are using is representative of your data. So that's how we're able to keep the UI itself very snappy and performant. What will then happen is when you've completed your recipe and you execute the job, Trifecta will use a variety of execution frameworks, whether that's Apache Spark or Amazon EMR, and will process that data and apply the transformation steps that you've created to your data when creating the output. So that will run in the background on your either on-premise setup or your cloud setup. And so that's how we're able to handle very, very large volumes of data, like you mentioned, petabytes of data. So the reason that we're able to use that visual interface is because of the sampling.
Cool. I really like that architecture when I first experienced that. Okay, question for consensus, Harrison. Quick, hold on for a second. Is the Trifecta tool mostly useful at the onset of a project when discovering data? Does the tool help with ongoing monitoring and optimizing of models, assuming no significant data changes?
More of the former than the latter. I mean, I think that if you're not changing your data features, and you're not changing your algorithms, you're just updating it, maybe changing weights, let's say, it's still going to have utility if you made it part of your operational system, like the previous questioner was asking, if you wanted to run batches to standardize the data. But yeah, most of its utility is in the exploration and changing direction side of things.
Okay.
At least for me.
I will also pass the same question to David from Trifecta. Also, take this question as well. Do you have any use cases where Trifecta is used for real-time extraction from on-prem for cloud applications?
So we don't stream the data through Trifecta, so it's not real time in that sense, but you can schedule at very frequent intervals so that your data output is being updated fairly continuously. As for answering the previous question, we do have, so a big element of Trifecta is on the initial discovery. You're able to create recipes to transform your data into an output that you like. Once you have that recipe in place, you can then put that into production so that the output is always running through that recipe that you've created. It's always being cleaned and standardized and blended with other sources, and the output is then the desired output. So there's a lot of value saved in being able to allow business users to create these recipes with the data that they know best, and then put that recipe into a production workflow that then transfers the data from its raw state to something that's clean and standard. Does that help answer it?
I think so, but I also want to switch over to place the same question for Harrison from Consensus.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did you use it for real time?
No, we're not using it for real time. Much like, I mean, part of what David was speaking of, Trifecta has some different products that you can use to deploy these things into production. Generally, though, for our needs, we've gone a different route. We use some of the Apache products for real-time stream processing. And your developers may tend to want to go that direction instead. I found Trifecta's sweet spot for us really is on the more of the business product user side, where you're able to do things that previously required an awful lot of training and constant reinforcement how to do. So if someone's already really good at R and very familiar with it, you can probably do a lot of these transforms yourself. I think they're trickier and more laborious than Trifecta will let you do them. But if you have that skill set, you may not find this quite as necessary. But I'd say if you're on the more of the business end of things, then this is something that's incredibly powerful and quick and easy to learn and pick back up. You can go away from it for a month if it happens, or more, a couple months, and come back and you remember how to use it right away.
All right, cool. Okay. All right. I think I have some more questions based on answers we got for Trifecta. Like you mentioned, Wrangle, the programming language. The question is, can we use SQL syntax instead of Wrangle in Trifecta?
So we do allow for SQL pushdown. So if you're connecting to a relational database, for instance, or Hive, you can use SQL to create a subset of data that you're then using in Trifecta, or even transform your data prior to bringing it into the interface inside of Trifecta. So there is a way to write SQL statements to create the data that you see in Trifecta. You can't use Trifecta, the interface that I walked through in the demo. You can't use that to create SQL statements. So Wrangle is separate from SQL in that regard. So Wrangle is meant to be sort of a intuitive language that business users can pick up, and you're constantly seeing sort of feedback about the transformations that you're creating and what they look like. So we do find that to be a lot more valuable to less technical users than trying to pick up SQL and using that from a business perspective.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, one question about explainability. Okay, I see how the filters work. I need to validate. Sorry. How can I see the filters work? I need to validate and explain the data being used for the decision. Is there a way to have that like trace the paper trail?
Yeah. So when you execute the job, I didn't get to show this on the demo, but when you execute the job, we have a results summary that shows you a bunch of metadata on your job output, the distributions of values in each column. And so this is applied to the entire data set rather than just the sample. So you can sort of validate how you've filtered down your data through that. Yeah, I think.
Okay. Because you mentioned metadata, can you another question, right? Can you add metadata to the base data, that is like where it came from, time frame, validity, etc.?
Yeah. So in the flow view itself, there's some metadata on the source of the data, where it's housed within that platform, what time you created that data set within Trifecta, and things like that.
Okay, cool. All right. Can you specify that specific data value should conform to regular expressions? Like if you have a date, month, year, can we write regular expressions that each part should be either month, or date? Do you support regular expressions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So we have two different frameworks that we can use. We have Trifecta patterns that we've built to be a little bit more intuitive for someone who might not know regular expressions. And then you also have the ability to extract patterns or replace patterns or split on patterns using regular expressions as well, or just using literal strings if you want to go that route as well. So there's some flexibility in terms of pattern matching, pattern identification, and using both Trifecta patterns and regular expressions there.
Okay. All right. Last question before we wrap it up. Can we create graphs in Trifecta? I think we did see histograms, but can we create other kinds of graphs in Trifecta?
No. So the visualizations that you see within the tool are meant to guide both your discovery of the data and the transformations of your data. So for instance, in the demo, I clicked on the black values in the data quality bar to apply a transformation to the missing values in a column, for instance. These visualizations are all sort of meant for discovery and for guiding transformations. But again, we're not an analytics tool. We're not a visualization tool. So we don't want Trifecta to be used for dashboarding or creating visualizations or things of that nature.
Okay. Last question. What is the pricing for Trifecta?
Yeah, so the pricing is based off of the number of users and the volume of data or the size of the cluster that it's being installed on. We do have a free version of the product that's available to everyone. This is not a trial. This is something that you can use. It supports data up to 100 megabytes, and you can use local files for that. So there's different pricing options for the version of Trifecta that you're interested in. So if you're more interested, I would check out our website and try and get in touch with our team.
All right. Thanks, David and Harrison. Thank you all for attending today's webinar.